Welcome to my channel, or welcome back. My name is Holly, and today I thought it would be fun to recreate this tumbler that I made for my granddaughter, one of my granddaughters, last year. I loved the glitter. I loved the dots that I used on the bottom, the ombre, everything. There are a couple things I didn't like. One of them was I didn't do distressing around the entire tumbler because I wanted the decal area to be blank, and it turns out I don't like that to be blank. And I used way too much epoxy additive, and I used it over the decal, which took away from the design. So I'm going to recreate this ×3 today. I'm using 3 different sizes and styles of hog tumblers from the Stainless Depot. 2 of these are going to be different sizes of what they call the modern curve twist. So they have twist lids. So you have to make sure you get your decals aligned to those lids. The other one has a push-on lid. That is the smallest of the 3 tumblers. And so when you're applying your decal to this style of tumbler, you don't have to be very specific about where you place your decal. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start by sanding. I'm using a 60 grit sanding block. I'm going to scuff up all 3 of these tumblers all around and the bottom. And then I think it was the tiniest one had a little sticker on it, so I pulled that sticker off and I used acetone and rubbing alcohol to get rid of that residue. So after you sand, you want to spritz a paper towel. Well, this is what I do anyway. I spritz a paper towel with rubbing alcohol and then wipe it and clean off all that dust inside and on the outside of the tumblers before I put them in their foam inserts. Before I put the foam inserts inside the tumblers. To create my white pink ombre, I'm using a Rustoleum 2x white and then Color Shot Farmer's Daughter. So I'm not gonna record this part, it's outside and I just don't have a good recording area outside. But what I do is I did the pink first and then I did the white and then I did another very light dusting of the pink and then finished with the white over the top so that they sort of blend together, and I wanted the white to fall over the pink rather than the pink falling over the white, so you end with the lightest color. When I ombre, I typically do my lightest colors on top and my darkest colors on the bottom. Before you apply your epoxy and your glitter or your glitter glue or whatever method you use to apply your glitter to your tumblers, you want to make sure that your spray paint is completely dry. So I'm using my heat gun to dry it. The white, as you can see, is a flat spray paint, but the pink is glossy. So it's going to look like it's still wet, but it's not. I'm just using the heat gun until it's totally dry to the touch. And then I'm going to use the hang method for my epoxy application. So for the hang method, I take the tumbler turner handle in my hand and I hold my tumblers upside down, and then I apply a small, I guess, dollop of epoxy on the bottom of the tumblers, and then let that epoxy spill over the edge and use a gloved hand to spread it out very sparsely across the entire tumbler. After all 3 of my tumblers are coated with the epoxy, it is time to begin dropping the glitter. So I'm going to start with Champink. That's going to go on the bottom base of the tumbler and spill over onto the white a little bit. And then the top is going to be white to pink. And then after this epoxy dries, I'll be applying another coat and then sprinkling as if dots over the top of the Champink glitter. Champink is from Maestra Creations. White to pink is a UV color changing glitter. So when it's not in the sunshine, it's white. If you take it out into the sunshine or under a UV lamp, it turns pink. It's really pretty. And then the dots, the as if, are also from the glitter guy. So here I am using Champink over the bottom of the tumbler, starting with the base, holding my tumbler at an angle, and then letting the glitter fall down. So sometimes I'll hold my hand a little bit close with my glitter to get a more dense coverage, and then I'll lift my hand into the air, holding my tumbler at an angle to let the glitter fall naturally more slowly and hit the tumbler and spill in a natural pattern over the white. So it just takes some practice. Sometimes I really mess up and sometimes it looks beautiful. So I was really happy with the way these 3 turned out. So it was a good day. I used a fast setting epoxy for this initial layer where I applied the glitter. So I didn't have to wait very long for that epoxy to dry, especially because it was such a thin coating on all the tumblers. So after I apply my glitters, I just let it sit for about 3 hours, and then I used a dry chip brush. I use the same brush over and over. It's a very large chip brush to dust off any of the excess glitters that may be loose. And then I'm going to take my craft knife to clean up the edge. So I run my craft knife around the edge, and then I'll pull out that handle and the tumblers and turn my hand so that my craft knife is at like a 45-degree angle, and then run it around the edge of the tumblers again, because you want your stainless steel to be exposed to any of the following applications of epoxy, because that is how you create your seal. So if you don't have your epoxy go over and touch the naked stainless steel, you're not actually going to have a true seal. So make sure you do that with all your tumblers. It really does make a big difference. So once I turn my hand and I run my craft knife over the edge to expose the stainless steel, I'm also going to take a 60 grit sanding block, run it over the edge at an angle so that that stainless steel is very crisp and clean, and ready to be cleaned up with rubbing alcohol before I apply my layer of epoxy over the top. During this step in the process is also when I clean up the rim. The very first time, I clean my rim several times throughout the process of making these tumblers, but I want to make sure that I get any of that spray paint residue off of there, because with the following applications of epoxy, sometimes you have the epoxy that runs over the rim and it drops inside that tumbler, and it just makes it a lot easier to clean up if you're starting with a clean tumbler in the first place. So now I'm using a quick coat to seal in all those glitters, let that dry completely before I go over my tumblers with a second application of epoxy. Now, all the other applications of epoxy I'm going to use are not going to be fast setting epoxies, because it tends to leave ripples in my tumblers, and I don't know, I just don't like how it dries a lot of the time. So I'm going to be using Jessica Flynn's Flynn Sister Boutique epoxy for all the final layers. I will link her website below. No, I don't have a discount code, but I do believe that her epoxy is worth every penny. I have been loving it so far, and I'm on my second gallon. So go give it a try. To get the best application and the clearest finish, the most glossy shine with Jessica's application, she recommends warming it up in this little baby bottle warmer. So I do that every single time. There have been times in my past videos where you see me do this and I mix it too quickly when it's really, really hot. If you do that, it's going to cure a lot faster. So make sure that you're giving yourself enough time and cool that epoxy down enough so that if you're working with 3 tumblers like I am, you don't want it to cure too quickly. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get it on that second or third tumbler. So this time I turned off my little baby bottle warmer like a good girl, and I let my epoxy sit and cool down before I squirted it into my little cups. So I'm using parts A and B, and then I'm going to put those into a bigger container. I'm going to mix it slowly, very slowly for 4 minutes, maybe longer if I still see the little separation strings in my epoxy between the A and the B. So you'll be able to tell if it's fully mixed because those little stringy pieces will not be there anymore. Okay, this epoxy I'm going to be applying just like I did the hang method with the ombre glitter. This epoxy is going to be the one where I'm also going to sprinkle the glitter dots onto the base and over the edge. I do want this layer of epoxy to be a bit thicker than what I initially started with, because I want it to coat that white glitter and give it a very, very smooth finish. I don't want to have to sand too much if unnecessary. So I'm going to do a fairly thick coat. I have to get those dots on this tumbler very quickly because the epoxy is going to start running all over and off the tumbler if I don't move fast. So I'm going to apply it quickly. I'm going to sprinkle the dots quickly, and then I'm going to immediately get it on my turner. So these tumblers have been on my turner since I applied the dots. I am not letting them sit the entire 24 hours before applying this layer of epoxy. I waited about, it was overnight. So man, probably, I would say maybe 10 hours after I applied the epoxy where I sprinkled the dots. Now I'm going in with this layer of epoxy. And this is my final layer of epoxy before the next step, which will be to tape off the bottom and the top of the tumblers and then apply 3 different colors of spray paint to begin my distressed look that I'm going for. So you want to make sure that after this application of epoxy, so far this is, let's see, I did a very thin layer to apply the ombre glitters. I did another semi-thin layer to apply the dots, and now this is a pretty thick layer. So this is the 3rd layer of epoxy. I want this to cure completely, totally cure before I apply my tape and my spray paint. I guess I didn't record where I applied the tape, but it was really easy. The goal for the tape is just to keep the spray paint off the very top edge and then the bottom rim of the tumbler. So you don't have to apply the tape if you don't want to. I just thought it would make my cleanup a lot easier. So I applied a strip of masking tape over the bottom of the tumbler, wrapped it around the base, and then I applied a strip of tape over the top of the tumbler. That way when I sprayed my black spray paint, which is going to be the bottom color, I want the darkest spray paint on the bottom, it's not going to spill over the edge and I don't have to, you know, clean up so much. Then I applied this pink over the top. I had to do a couple layers of pink to the next 2 tumblers because this 1 layer of pink turned out it wasn't enough for me and I didn't really like the way it was distressing. So this is tumbler number 1. This is like my experimental tumbler, and I initially just sprayed 1 layer of that pink and then 1 layer of the white on top of it, let it dry and started distressing. And I wish I would have done it thicker. So for the following 2 tumblers, I did a thicker layer of pink and a thicker layer of white, but it's the same process. You do the black first, let it dry completely, spray your pink, let it dry completely, and then spray your white. After my spray paint was completely dry, I peeled off both pieces of tape and then I began distressing. When I distress, I always start with acetone. So you're going to see my hands go from spray painty, gross to, wow, those are really gross, dry looking spray painty hands because I didn't wear gloves. I should have. The acetone eats through the gloves, but it's better than making my hands all dry and crispy, but I didn't. I always like to start with acetone on a paper towel. So I'll make my initial distressing marks with the acetone on the paper towel because the paper towel is pretty abrasive, and I'll just go all the way around the tumbler, put some at the top, put some at the bottom, work it in the center, maybe leave a little mark in the center, and then I'll throw that paper towel away, get a brand new clean paper towel, dip it into the acetone again, and then go over the exact same spots where I just removed the spray paint to clean it up a little bit. And then you'll start seeing the exposed glitter coming through. And then after that, I'll move down to like a 90% isopropyl alcohol and go over those same marks to clean it up. So I just keep cleaning it up around that same area every time, but the strength of whatever I'm using to remove the spray paint gets less and less. So it moves from like acetone to 90% rubbing alcohol to then a 50% rubbing alcohol. And then I'll finish off with a 50% to clean it up and very... What in the heck am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is you go from a higher strength to a lower strength. The lower strength you're going to use to clean up at the final finish, the very last end, to just get everything all smooth and pretty and ready to go for another layer of epoxy. It really just wasn't that hard to say. So here's a really good example of what it looks like near the end when you're moving down to the strength of whatever it is you're using to remove your spray paint. So you can see that I've used acetone to get rid of the big areas of spray paint, and then I started using rubbing alcohol to get into those little nooks and crannies. So I'll move from a paper towel and acetone to like a little cloth, like a makeup sponge or a makeup cloth with rubbing alcohol. And then getting inside those little details around the edge, I will use a Q-tip with rubbing alcohol to really tidy it up. For this layer of epoxy over my distressing, I am going to add my additive. So like at the very beginning of the video, I showed you the cup I made last year where I put the additive over the decal. I do not want to do that this time. So this is a perfect time to add this additive. It's just going to be a little sprinkle. It is called Halo. It is from PDB Creative Studios. I'm going to mix that in there and apply it over all 3 tumblers before I have my decal. That way my decal will be bright and crisp and it won't be hidden by the sparkles of the additive. This additive is so very pretty. I'll show you at the very end video if I can get a good shot of it. I don't know if I'll be able to. I don't know if the camera will actually capture the shine or the sparkle that this leaves on your tumblers. It's so pretty. I spent a long time trying to figure out which vinyls I wanted to use. I knew I wanted to do an offset with a darker color underneath a lighter color, but I wasn't really sure if I wanted black or gray, and I wasn't sure if I wanted pink or, I wasn't sure. So I spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to figure out the combination of vinyls, and this is what I came up with. So I'm using a black for the offset, so that's going to be the bottom larger piece of the words, and then I used a color shifting pink to like a yellowish, because this tumbler has the pinks and the yellows and the blacks in the dots on it, and then the white color changing glitter goes from white to pink, and it has sort of a yellowish hue to it. So I thought this would be really pretty. So I'm really happy with these two colors together, especially after they were applied to the tumbler. They look really pretty. How many times can I say really pretty? It's really pretty, really pretty. I had to be really careful when applying this decal to this tumbler because it is a curved tumbler. So what I did to start is I sliced into the adhesive transfer tape to sort of allow me to bend the vinyl as I needed as I worked around the tumbler. The bottom half of it I still wasn't happy with because it curved upward. So if I were to make this decal on my own, which I know a lot of crafters really love making their own decals, I don't really love it so much. I'll do it, but I don't love it. I would rather buy something that's already made. But if I were to make this on my own, what I would do is have a template for a curved tumbler, and then I would curve those words so that when I applied it to the tumbler, I wouldn't have to worry about it moving upward and not following the curve of the tumbler. But if you get one that's meant for a straight tumbler, then you have to kind of fuss around and shift and move things as needed. So that's what I did. The bottom half of this was crooked and curved upward. I didn't like it, so I completely removed it, and then I decided to just put those pieces back one at a time. So I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so here's what it looks like with the bottom words removed. So I left silence isn't golden, and then I'm going to piece together it's by itself, and then suspicious by itself, and then hashtag mom life. So I'm just going to put those pieces back on one at a time, and then put the other layer, the pink vinyl, over the top of it, and then this tumbler will be ready for another layer of quick coat, and then a final application of epoxy. So I'm going to do all three tumblers the same way, except the other three tumblers, I didn't have an issue with the curve. Okay, the last step is to seal your vinyl and apply epoxy. So I sealed my vinyl again with quick coat. You could also use a clear spray paint or maybe glitter glue. I've never sealed vinyl with glitter glue, so I can't recommend that because I'm not really sure how well that works. But I do know that other people do use that. So let me know. If you seal your vinyl with glitter glue, let me know if it works. And then your layer of epoxy, and then your tumblers should be done. All right, here they are off the turners, completely cured. I really like the way they turned out. I did have a couple spots of vinyl that lifted over the top of a bumpy area that I didn't sand down perfectly. So next time I'll have to double check and make sure everything is 100% smooth before I apply the epoxy. That's my dog. Hi, Gigi. And then I tried to capture outside. I tried to get the white to turn to pink, but I couldn't really find any sunshine. And I tried to stand where I knew the sun was, but no go. So I brought him into the house, and I used my UV light to make the white change to pink. So it looks pretty dang cool. It looks really more like a purple than a pink, but it's still pretty cool looking. So there you go. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. I'll link everything down below that I used for this project. And I hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to link another video with a tumbler project that I did with distressing so that you can kind of compare and see how to get some different looks. So thank you so much.